Hi, I'm Sophie Wilson, and this is People of the Pool, where we have conversations with those making a positive change in Liverpool's business community. We're known for our music, for our culture, tourism, and of course, football. But what's caught my eye since moving back from down south is the innovation and entrepreneurship that's happening in the city region. And this podcast is about championing just that. I'm blue, not red. I don't have a purple wheelie bin, but I'm still a proud Scouser, and I can't wait to share the stories of positive, inspirational changemakers with me. In this episode of People of the Pool, we meet Lynn Haim, the CEO of Baltic Creative CIC, a business community which supports the growth of creative and digital industries in the Liverpool city region. It's also home to my business, Tuesday Media. Lynn and Elsie, welcome to People of the Pool.
Hello.
So, like me, Lynn, you're a Scouser who was away for many years, in your case in Manchester. I know you've come back to Liverpool. What have your impressions been of the city as it is now?
Well, I think I came back about 4 and a bit years ago, work-wise. I've lived here for a lot longer. And at the time, it was in the midst of a bit of public sector challenges, a bit of controversy around that side. It feels like it's settled down a lot, but I think a lot of the feedback, because I was trying to keep those Manchester connections as well and try and engage more with what was going on with both cities, there was quite some consistent feedback on, we're not going to kind of get involved in Liverpool at the moment. We'll wait for the dust to settle and perhaps revisit it. And this was more from the sort of development investment side of things before I came into this role. But it does feel like that's moved on quite a lot now, and it does feel like it's in a better place. I think that the view I had of the city was, well, in fact, it was somebody that mentioned to me that, it's great you're from Liverpool to come and work for us in the previous role because you're from Liverpool and people in Liverpool only work with people in Liverpool. And I was a bit grumpy about that at the time, and I was thinking, well, that's a bit inward facing and a bit narrow-minded, and it was somebody in Manchester that had passed that comment. And I've kind of changed my view on it now, because I was like, we need to broaden our horizons a bit and open the doors, and we need to encourage people to come into Liverpool from beyond the city. But I think the counter-argument to that, which is the positive side of it, is it's good to support your local businesses, and we do it at Baltic Creative. If there's any contracts or work that we need doing, we always look for either tenants first. You might do that for us, but it's Liverpool. Operators wise, if we're looking at new companies to come in or run something, we'll always try and go for Liverpool businesses. But I think for the city as a whole, I think it would be beneficial to not be so protective or kind of closed shop and be kind of, no, we only deal with this and we don't kind of open the doors. And I think we should be a bit more daring and open to competition. And I think it would sharpen everyone's game a little bit to be, let's see what other cities, not always Manchester, that's always the obvious comparison, isn't it? But, what anywhere else in the UK, if people want to come and design a building and they're an architecture practice from outside the city, I think it would be refreshing and keep everyone else on the toes.
Yeah.
So that side of it, I think, I personally, my own view is I think we could be a bit bolder and a bit braver with some of the development side of things. That there's some good buildings and some great heritage, and that's always been strong. But I think reputationally and to increase the investment, which I think has probably stalled a little bit over the last few years, I think we perhaps need to think a bit bigger.
Be a bit more outward. Yeah, there is that sort of cliche of the Republic of Liverpool, isn't
exactly,
there?
Exactly,
I mean, we've had other guests on as well talking about that and bringing in talent from outside nationally and internationally raises the game, and it's that collaborative piece, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's not a closed shop. We're here to do business and we want to kind of open the doors. And dare I mention Eurovision so early on, but that's a great opportunity to showcase the city and all the great things that's going on. And obviously it's the culture and the tourism angle more than anything, but there's lots of little business initiatives going on at the same time to maximise it. And we've got, the eyes of the world on the city and all those of the sound bites, but it is the opportunity, isn't it, to say, isn't it great? Come and do stuff.
Well, if we've got time, we'll revisit Eurovision, but just sort of taking a step back, and particularly I think for listeners who aren't familiar with the Baltic Triangle area and the Baltic Creative, it'd be really interesting to hear your take. So I actually read a piece in The Echo recently. It was a long form piece about how the Baltic Creative area is now sort of one of the hippest places in the UK to live and work. And then, you know, whereas it said 14 years ago, it was kind of just going to be, you know, written off as a red light district. Yeah. Can you tell listeners what the Baltic Creative CIC is and how it sort of played a role in that regeneration to be the great place that it is today?
I mean, that was the origins. If you mentioned it, it was earmarked as, I think, one of 5 sites around the city to be a designated red light district. So, you know, official title. It wasn't a great place to be at the time. It was a no-go zone, but there were some very passionate occupiers already in the location. And I think when the regeneration angle came into play, they were quite keen and passionate, as I said, about protecting the sort of ethos that was there and the edginess, and not for it to be gentrified as regeneration, but done in a kind of managed way that it retained its cool.
Yeah.
So I think when Baltic Creative was born, about 13 years ago now, it was a good bunch of people who absolutely had a vested interest and wanted to make it something special, but not just polished. So I think when Baltic Creative started, there was a lot of public sector support for it, and the buildings were gifted effectively. And the origins of the CIC are that we are purely to benefit the creative and digital industries. So we're officially a not-for-profit, but we obviously generate profit through the management of the spaces that we manage. But all profits made are reinvested into creative and digital industries. At the moment, it's focused on the spaces that we've got in the Baltic area. And so I think we've got about 120,000 square feet dotted around 5 schemes in the Baltic Triangle. And it was very much a catalyst then for other movement and improvement in the vicinity. So there's still some of the original operators there. Liverpool Biennial, one of the early adopters there. I think they predated Baltic Creative, but they're now one of our tenants. And District, which was the Picket back in the day, and Jane Casey's involvement. She was the original chair of Baltic Creative, is still there and operating. So it's moved on dramatically, and there's lots of other bits and pieces that have come into the mix. But I think the success of the critical mass really gave a bit of comfort for other businesses and operations to come in that location. And because it was very much earmarked as creative and digital, the supporting offers that have come still retain that element of cool, and it still kept the edginess, and then the further expansion with the likes of Kane's breweries a bit further along, and it has, in terms of the sort of gentrification side of it, there's still a camp that are very protective over keeping Baltic Triangle and the area the sort of edgy cool that it currently is. Obviously, the appeal of it now is quite broad, so some of the residential developers have come in, and it will push the values of the spaces and the land in that vicinity. And I think almost sort of organically it will, it's moving into that zone of gentrification. But I'd like to think that even the resi developers are there because they want to be a part of what's already there, rather than them coming in to go, we're going to transform this area and we're going to polish it and it's going to be something else.
Yeah.
It's more like, it's great, everyone wants to be there 24/7. There's obviously a nighttime economy, which is as strong as our business sectors, but they want to join in that rather than try and move it into a different direction, which is hopefully a positive.
Obviously, it's creative and edgy and cool, Lynn, because Tuesday Media is based there. But just in terms of painting a picture for listeners, just physically what it looks like and the area, just a short description would be great.
So it was generally a conversion of warehouse buildings, the kind of original set of Baltic Creative spaces. and Creative Campus, which is where your home is. We've got 92 Degrees Coffee, who are our shopfront, effectively, on Jamaica Street. We've got the statue of Bob Marley over the road, which a lot of people know and love. And I actually noticed this morning that the hop on, hop off bus pulls in to look at the Bob Marley statue, which is quite great.
And all the graffiti along that road.
Yeah, and even the skate park, which has had a bit of a tidy up recently. It's just got points of interest, I think, which make it good for people visiting.
Fantastic graffiti.
Yeah, and in the campus itself, once you get behind the gate, as it were, which is the sort of private workspaces, we've got the sheds converted for a couple of people. We've got the bigger sheds, but it's a very collaborative environment. There's lots of OSB and plywood and kind of concrete floors and plants. And
what's OSB?
Oh God, do you know what? I've no idea what it stands for, but it's the wood. It's not plywood. It's the sort of
oriented strand board.
There you go.
Oriented strand board.
Yeah.
From
I've never known
Jacob
what it's stood for,
in the
but
studio.
there's plenty of OSB around. Yeah, but we've got meeting spaces there. We've got private spaces. We've got the co-working that Basecamp operate in there. But it is very communal. It's, you know people's faces. You have chats in the kitchens over your brew times and stuff. So it's just got a great feel to it. The next iteration from the Creative Campus, we developed some shop fronts. So they're all workspaces, but they have got the full shop front glazing onto Jamaica Street. So we've got the likes of Dorothy and Skiddle in there, and they're really popular. We've got a constant stream of inquiries for those spaces, but they actually don't come around that often either. But yeah, they're really popular, and they just give people that sort of engagement, and it animates the streetscape a little bit more, I think, seeing what businesses are in there and what's going on.
100%.
And then Digital House was the most recent development, which was the kind of next phase, I suppose, from the original Baltic Creative. And that is fully let at the moment. But it was the sort of probably a slightly more grown-up version. It was an office development, a dilapidated building we acquired from the City Council, and that completed in 2019. It's been relatively well let ever since. But yeah, workspace with the cafe downstairs, and it's got another slightly more polished space, I suppose, from an office spec. So it's nice to have anything from the co-working in Basecamp. We can accommodate people through every stage of their growth, and then end up with a couple of 1,000 square feet or grade A office space if they want that, if their journey is taking them in that direction. And then as a complete change from that, we've got Northern Lights, which is a Northlit roof warehouse behind Keynes, over Stanhope Street Way. And that's the kind of makers spaces. So we've got a glass blower, ceramicists, arts collectives in there. So that's the sort of slightly messier makers space that's a bit rough and ready, but it's...
And there's
it's
a cycle cafe in there as well.
And the cycle cafe ride, which is on the ground floor.
So it's a real... I mean, as tenants, I can say, it's that creative environment. We love it because we're obviously in PR and marketing, but we have UX designers, graphic designers, developers, and we can bounce ideas off each other. So I think that collaborative work space feel is so alive as soon as you walk into the Baltic Creative. But as you say, being situated in that greater sort of environment where you've got the makers and the skate ramp, it's great. And we love bringing clients there because it's just such a talking point.
Because it's collaboration and a community, but there's communities within communities. So each building's got its own community, and then it's we do look after all of the tenants as part of Baltic Creative. So whether you're in Northern Lights or Digital House or the campus, you get the same comms and the events and the business support events and initiatives that we put on. Everyone's invited to. So it's quite a diverse bunch of companies and people, but you are part of a family. And then even within Baltic Creative, we're part of the wider Baltic Triangle community. Yeah. And I've noticed actually one of the biggest things for me as an experience I didn't particularly anticipate was how welcoming and involved everyone is in Baltic Triangle, and everyone's on the same path and wants the same things, which is great. But it's very joined up, which is refreshing for, sharing landlords information and that kind of stuff.
Again, for listeners, the Baltic Triangle being the kind of, if you looked at it from an aerial view on a Google map, it's the district of Liverpool.
Literal triangle in that zone. Don't ask me what the boundaries are. It's further than you think. I think it goes down towards the river and takes in the Baltic Fleet pub, and then it goes down Jamaica Street towards John Lewis and the little mini roundabout there. But it is that. But it incorporates
the residents and everybody around there.
Everything in that zone.
Yeah, I mean, it's really inclusive, and I think we benefit hugely from being there. What do you think other cities could learn from the success? Because it has been touted as a major success, hasn't it? The whole
it
region.
Is, and again, it's one of the big surprises for me is how far-reaching it has reputation-wise, and we. Not only UK-wide, we have delegations all the time wanting to come and say, it's held up as an example of a successful regeneration project. And it's partly Baltic Creative because we've got quite a chunk of that area. But again, it's one part of a bigger piece. And I think in terms of the story behind it, we wouldn't suggest it's the only place that has experience that success, but I think the fact that it was a creative and digital cluster, I think generally just means you've got like-minded businesses. It's specific but diverse, if that makes sense. So whilst there isn't a theme to the businesses that we look after other than they all fall under a creative and digital banner, but even under that banner it can be massively diverse. There's not really two businesses the same. But everyone has the same, I suppose, the space appeals to them, and that community side of it is a massive deal. I think the testimony, I guess, to the design back in the day was groundbreaking. It's not changed dramatically in 13 years in terms of the campus. And the tours that we do now, people still come in and go, wow, this is cool, isn't it? And the sheds are great. But we had the pool bikes and plants everywhere, and the kind of biophilia became a bit of a buzzword only a few years ago. So this was really quite forward thinking. Yeah, I mean, it's just the Ponzi word for put lots of plants in and it's healthy and
Liverpool Podcast Studios. You've seen it here,
surrounded by them. But from other cities' perspective, the model worked from the CIC and the fact that we do generate profit, but it's reinvested. It's sustainable in the literal sense of the word. It's financially sustainable, but it's, also we have the sustainable features as well. But it works on so many levels. And I suppose it's a great example of how not to write off a location. But if you can focus on the right solution, it kind of, I suppose, to focus on creative and digital, there were elements of that peppered into that location already. So it can kind of grow from that stage.
We've created People of the Pool podcast with the support of the team at Bengo Media. Dozens of businesses, large and small, turn to Bengo Media to get their podcasts up and running through their training, consultancy, and even hands-on production. And right now, Bengo Media is offering you, People of the Pool listeners, free online training to help get your podcast launched in 90 days. You'll get insight into the steps to take and some of the biggest mistakes to avoid. So, to claim your free online podcast training from Bengo Media, go to podcastschools.com now. That's podcastschools.com. Sounds like that reinvestment piece is the cornerstone of the regeneration of Baltic Creative, and obviously the focus on those creative and digital industries. What role do you think they play in the Liverpool City region, and how important is it to kind of cultivate these kind of industries?
I think for the region, it's massively important as a sector. It's one of the strongest sectors. There's over 20-odd thousand. I think a few years ago, the last statistic I saw was about 23,000 employees in that sector in the city region. And the growth of that sector outstrips the average growth across the UK. So it's a really strong sector in the city. It's not massively acknowledged. I suppose it's quite broad, but I think some of the key players like the gaming industry have historically kind of kept their heads down just by the nature of what they do. It's a little bit cloak and dagger, it's a bit under the radar, and they work quite privately. But the likes of Sony, obviously quite a high profile move into Old Hall Street now on the other side of town. And frustratingly, I was at an event with somebody from Sony who said their first choice when they were moving from Wavertree was Baltic to come to, and another company that have recently moved into the Rope Walks area said the same. It was, first choice, where are we going to go? We can go anywhere in the city. Baltic, because it works for their staff and the kind of add-ons that you get other than the physical space. But there's no space there, so we're fully let pretty much. There's a bit of a churn, but it's kind of small scale stuff. But it's a big frustration now to say, we could have captured two really significant operators in the creative and digital sector. So there's a potential for growth there. We need more space to accommodate them as well, and I think some public sector support, and it's part of my role and my kind of thought process for the coming months and years is to start those conversations and engagement to see what we can do next, because there's some kind of latent demand that we need to be able to accommodate. But I think even on a stage beyond Liverpool, it's a really strong story to attract investment and to retain the talent that we create in Liverpool, because there's lots of great graduates coming out of the universities and the City of Liverpool College. And I think what we need to make sure is we don't automatically lose those to the likes of Manchester, Leeds, London. Yeah. And kind of make a bit more noise about the businesses and the great work that's already been carried out in the city region. And I think perhaps some of the businesses need to play a part in that as well, and kind of shout about how successful they are, or, some business wins or whatever it might be, is just to get that engagement and kind of make a bit more noise than perhaps has currently been.
I mean, that is a theme, talent retention, and it's one of the reasons why we've developed People of the Pool, is to showcase, to be the platform for these stories, for the amazing people and businesses and communities that are making a difference, and the opportunities that exist for young people in the Liverpool City region. But it is a question that comes up quite a lot. I mean, how do you think, have you got any answers to that in terms of how we can
to retain
that younger generation?
We try and work, we do work quite closely. We've got memorandum of understandings with LJMU and City Liverpool College, and we will readily engage with any of the education establishments. And I suppose we kind of act on behalf of the occupiers, because the education facilities want to know how to get their graduates into the businesses, again, sort of keep them in the city region and not just send them off into the wide world elsewhere. And the businesses need to engage as well, just to make sure they're getting the right graduates in to what they need in terms of requirements for staffing. And I think it's joining up the dots, and we hear an awful lot from the businesses that want to retain talent and grow their businesses, and they need people to be able to do that. And the education establishments want to engage with the businesses, but there's still a bit of a gap between that engagement between the two. We're trying to provide that link in some way.
Places like the Baltic, for young people, you can live there, you can go out there, place. You can eat there, drink there. That to me feels like a great poster child for a fabulous graduate, or not necessarily graduate, but a fabulous place to get a start in life and be at the centre of things, whilst cashing in on those career opportunities.
Into the real world from your university life or your school life, whatever it might be.
So what's your favourite place in the Baltic then?
Oh, I don't think I've got one, to be honest. I think I did take a photograph my first week when I'd gone for a bit of a stroll around the manor one lunchtime. And I think that walk back from the city centre, it kind of captured the shopfront units on either side and the Bob Marley statue in the campus.
Jamaica Street.
Up Jamaica Street, looking towards Keynes and the Parliament Street. And it was just, I suppose it was a nice day, and it was just a snapshot. There were people outside. There was a lot of activity. And it was just like, oh, what a great place. It's just got a really nice vibe. It's got a good feel to it. And it's like asking who your favourite child is. I've only got one, so that's an easy question for me. But it's everything's so different in there. So Northern Lights is completely different.
Yeah.
And it comes with its own issues that we have from an operational perspective and a fabric perspective, but the people that are in there have a great time. It's, they're not paying the highest rents of our portfolio, but they've got a great community and they have wine Friday afternoons. It's a great space. But
great art on the outside of it as well,
yes,
isn't there?
Yeah. So it's that, I think that snapshot for me walking down Jamaica Street was the sort of mix of the business space and the campus and then the artwork. And it's this kind of like an all-encompassing little glimpse of what Baltic Creative is all about.
Very cool. So obviously you're a woman with a background in commercial property, and obviously that's sort of quite a traditionally male-dominated industry, and anyway, from my experience. And now you're the CEO of Baltic Creative. So what do you think, if any, have been the biggest challenges for you on this career path?
I've probably been lucky in terms of I don't feel like I've had specific challenges to my development as a female in the property industry. I suppose the ongoing disappointment and has always been the disappointment is the lack of females in the industry. You're quite right. It's very male dominated, and it still is. Even more so when I started out, probably coming up to 30 years, give or take. And I sort of fell into it I initially wanted to do construction. Dad was a builder and he wouldn't let me at the time. Not a place for a lady. So it started very much at that level. And it was kind of, okay, if I can't do construction, what else can I do? And he put me in touch with a surveyor, friend of his, who gave me a week's work experience. And he did licensed property. So we spent a week going around pubs, and he had valued the pubs and had half a pint of something or other. And I thought, oh, this is an all right gig.
This is good.
I'll have a bit of that. But he did actually put me on the right path to what courses to do. But out of, I think, 60 on my degree course, there were 5 of us, females. And I think 2 of us ended up in property out of that. So real poor statistic. And again, the same, I chose to do agency as a discipline when I started my working life, which is even more male dominant. Of all the disciplines within property, it's probably the most male dominated one. I thought I just quite like doing deals. It's very sociable. Lots of conversations and network happened in pubs on a Friday, and again, there's a theme
the good old days.
But yeah, it was like, great, go to the pub on a Friday, don't come back, but do a deal. Yeah, it's fine. But challenges wise, I did have, I think my first boss, who hopefully won't watch this, but I won't mention any names just in case. I was the first recruit he'd taken on. It was a one-man band, not in the Northwest, and he went on holiday for a couple of weeks and left me, I took pages and pages of notes because I was conscious I had a lot to do to hold the fort while he was on leave. And one of his parting shots was, if you could take the chandelier down in my office and clean it while I'm away. And I was talking about this the other week at International Women's Day. I was asked to speak with Joanne Anderson, and again, it was one of those, what challenges have you had as a female, and what issues? And I started off thinking, well, no, as I said at the beginning, I don't really think I've had major challenges. But then that popped in my head, and I thought, God, how outrageous! If somebody said that to me now, I would rip the head off for a start. But I don't think they would. And I was brought up as a polite, I'm much junior, I do what my boss asks me to do ultimately. So I can't even remember whether it was begrudging or not, but I took this chandelier down and took all the little drops off, and I washed them all and put it back together. I did it. I always did what I was told, rightly or wrongly.
Gosh.
And I did all the work that I had to do that week and I kept the place ticking over. And I remember vividly the day he walked back in from leave, walked in and glanced up straight away. And I was like, oh my God, I've broken my back for a couple of weeks doing all this work. And it was kind of like, by the way, did you just checking you clean the chandelier? But yeah, so that was one example. And I think I have a frustration now that I wasn't vocal at the time, but you know, I was
what
young.
Would you say
it was
to
my
him now?
first job. Well, I'd have told him exactly what to do with this chandelier, I think. But I think what is more disappointing is you kind of think, well, if I was a bloke and I was 6 foot, would you have asked me to clean the chandelier when you? And it's, you know, it's a very small example of something, but there's a theme that goes through. It's expectations of what you're going to do. There's an expectation that you might do property management rather than another discipline because you're a female and it's all, you know, it's very organised and methodical and, you know, you sat at your desk and it's kind of working through. As I say, you know, it's very organised. But I think I've always been a little bit rebellious in that if someone's going to tell me to do something, I'll go, no, well, I'm not doing that just because you expect me to do it. I'll go and look at something else instead and do what you're not expecting me to do. And generally I've got on well in that. I've always learned it's all about contacts in property. And, you know, if you are sociable and you're happy to meet people, I suppose the positive, if you can take the positive of being female, is I'm easy to remember as being one female in a room of suits or males, then you can kind of make a bit of a mark for yourself. And that's even the chandelier chap. When I ended up in another job, we happened to have a project in the area that he was based and I was the client at that point, and he got in touch to say, oh, you know, if you need anything, I'd love to get involved. And I thought, no, mate, you burn your bridges. Yeah. So that was a valuable lesson as well.
You never know.
Never burn your bridges. Be nice to everybody. But there's other stories that I couldn't possibly divulge without people knowing who I'm talking about. But there's lots of incidents as a female that you think it shouldn't happen. Yeah. And my only, I suppose, positive now is I think the current generation don't stand for it quite so much. And I think we need to empower that to continue as well and support and go, you know, if you're going to ruffle a few feathers and go, I'm not doing that just because I'm a woman, then, you know, power to your elbow. And that's, we need to make more noise about it.
Absolutely. And you are being the change, being the
Exactly.
CEO.
And it's nice now to be at the level that I am. And I try and get into schools, or I'll always try and promote females in property or in any career for that matter, because it doesn't have to be property. But if you're in an environment where it is male dominated, or you know you think you're in a minority of some description, is to know that you've got the support to speak out about it, and how to get beyond it.
Fantastic. Well, we're nearly out of time, but just a couple of very quick questions. So obviously we touched on it earlier, you know, there's a great sort of future ahead for Baltic Creative. What are you excited about for next year? What plans have you got that you can share with us?
I don't know if I can put a time scale on it. I suppose this year we've got the challenges everyone's facing, I guess, operational costs, the economy, cost of borrowing. The ideal, which the board are very much on board with at the moment, is there will be a growth phase. And again, going back to what I alluded to earlier, is that we've got demand that outweighs our supply. Yeah. And there's nothing more frustrating for me than to know we're getting inquiries. We have an inquiry schedule and a database. And when we do get the churn, we've got people that we know will be waiting to take that space. But it's we were talking about whether to do a press release to say one of our buildings was fully let again, but I kind of don't see that as a positive, because we want our doors to be open. So we need to kind of keep the conversations going and keep attracting the interest. But then hopefully when the economy's recovered or we're in a position of growth again, that we can look at where the next phases may be. And we're still keen to grow our footprint in the Baltic Triangle area, but also we have conversations going on elsewhere in the city region. So we're not purely looking at expanding the existing. We'll go a bit further afield and look at what opportunities
Something
may
happening in
exist
Southport?
beyond. Potentially, yeah. Again, as I say, conversations are ongoing and we're keeping doors open at the moment. There's nothing we can do immediately, but see, people put opportunities to us all the time, and we'll always look at them and consider them. But yeah, it's funding, access, and cost of borrowing, and all the other pressures that businesses are facing at the moment. It's kind of keeping our powder dry in the short term, but we've got an eye on the kind of next few phases and what else we can bring as the next iteration of Baltic Creative.
Sounds like a solid strategy.
Yeah.
So my final question, just for fun, which we ask all guests of People of the Pool, is if you were to call Baltic Creative by a Beatles song title, what would it be and why?
Okay. Well, there's a quite a large camp that might suggest that Beatles are too mainstream for Baltic Creative and it's not cool enough. I'm not one of those. I'm a big fan. I suppose as a general theme, with a little help from my friends, because it's not in isolation. We are part of a
don't think we've had
collaboration.
That one.
Okay,
looking
get to keep that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Brilliant.
I think that's it. I think everything we do is part of a wider, we've had public funding to get to where we are today and ongoing support, and we do work very much as a collective, and we try and bring our occupiers and partners along for the ride in everything we do. And yeah, that probably sums it up, I think.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Lynn. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. And I think hopefully we've sent Elsie to
She's
sleep
fast
there.
asleep.
I hope we haven't sent our
Thankfully.
listeners to sleep. But Elsie seems to be very comfortable. So
Yes.
thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for
And
having
Susie.
me.
Cheers. If you want to find out more about some of the amazing things that are going on in Liverpool City region, go to www.tuesday-media.com/People of the Pool. People of the Pool is presented by me, Sophie Wilson. Until next time.